Dozens of cities across the globe erupted in outrage. From Europe to Asia and Latin America, thousands of people took to the streets to denounce the arrest of hundreds of international humanitarian activists who joined the Global Sumud Flotilla (GSF). Their demand was clear: free the detained volunteers and break Israel's blockade of Gaza. Ironically, amid the fierce crackdown, a number of Israelis themselves joined the protests. Standing at the border with Gaza, they shouted slogans against their own government, demanding an end to what they called an inhumane and unlawful siege. The protests in Israel became one of the rarest yet most controversial scenes in the history of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Dozens of Jewish citizens defied their own state to defend the rights of Gaza's people. A burning question now emerges: is this the beginning of a moral rupture inside Israel itself? Crowds gathered at the border gates, blocking military convoys attempting to enter Gaza. Their fiery speeches condemned the army's interception of the GSF, a humanitarian fleet carrying aid. Their voices pierced through the suffocating silence of the blockade. Banners were raised with explosive slogans: by land and sea, break the siege, let food, water, fuel, and journalists enter Gaza, and the most shocking of all, stop the Holocaust in Gaza. Isn't invoking the term Holocaust in the context of Gaza a direct slap in the face of Israel's own historical trauma? Clashes soon broke out as Israeli soldiers attempted to disperse the crowd. Protesters defiantly lay down on the ground, refusing to be dragged away. The dramatic standoff showcased the raw power of civilian resistance against military force. But will the world dare to call this what it is, an assault on freedom of expression by Israel itself? Between Wednesday and Friday, the Israeli Navy stormed more than 40 GSF vessels, arresting at least 500 activists from over 50 countries. These ships carried aid, not weapons. So why were they treated as though they were hostile fleets? Is bringing food and medicine now considered an international crime? The global reaction was furious. Governments accused Israel of breaching international law, particularly the Geneva Conventions. After all, the GSF was a humanitarian mission, not a military operation. If Israel can arbitrarily detain hundreds of international activists, what hope remains for the 2 million people trapped in Gaza every day? Despite the outrage, Israel refused to back down. Prime Minister Netanyahu's government branded the flotilla a premeditated provocation that threatened national security. But the question lingers: is the blockade really about security, or is it a systematic punishment of Palestinians under the guise of self-defense? Across the globe, the streets echoed with solidarity. In London, Paris, Jakarta, and Buenos Aires, thousands marched, waving Palestinian flags, denouncing the arrests, and demanding the blockade's end. Mainstream outlets began to wonder: could the GSF be the spark that reignites a new wave of global solidarity with Gaza? The sight of Israelis protesting their own military shook the narrative even further. They denounced the government's brutality, calling it a stain on the nation's conscience. Isn't it ironic that the only democracy in the Middle East is now being mocked by its own citizens as a tyranny in disguise? One protester, whose voice went viral, shouted, "We are sick of this. We refuse to be occupiers. Gaza needs food, not bombs." His words spread worldwide, sparking both support and anger. But can such small voices shift Israeli politics, or will they be silenced with even greater force? Reports confirmed that the clashes grew more intense. Israeli forces fired tear gas, while demonstrators shielded themselves with nothing but their bodies. If this is how Israel treats its own dissenters, then what horrors are inflicted daily on the people of Gaza? In Washington, the Biden administration faced mounting pressure. Young Americans demanded an end to blank check support for Israel. Meanwhile, Europe remained split. Some governments condemned the arrests, while others stayed silent. Is the weapons trade worth more to the West than the lives of starving children in Gaza? Among the detainees were doctors, journalists, politicians, and artists, all united by a single purpose: delivering aid. Now, hundreds of them face imprisonment. Isn't it absurd that in the 21st century, peace activists are treated like international criminals? Some Western outlets described the GSF as a moral uprising against Israeli dominance in the Middle East. Yet pro-Israeli media dismissed the mission as political theater. But isn't the real question this: when human lives are at stake, who gets to decide what's political and what's humanitarian? Families of the detained activists wept in front of cameras, demanding their governments take action. Many asked why their leaders feared angering Israel more than protecting their own citizens. Why do trade deals seem to matter more than human lives? The crisis exposed a long-standing double standard: who is labeled a freedom fighter, and who is branded a terrorist? Since when did delivering flour and antibiotics to Gaza become a threat to global security? Inside Israel, protests expanded as youth movements, peace activists, and left-wing groups joined hands. Though their numbers were small, their message was powerful. Could this minority voice ignite an international firestorm? Online, outrage spread like wildfire. Hashtags like #FreeGSF and #StopGazaHolocaust trended worldwide. Even celebrities joined in, amplifying the call for justice. But will digital fury translate into real political change, or vanish as another fleeting trend? Inside Gaza, conditions remain catastrophic. Hospitals lack medicine, electricity is rationed, and clean water grows scarcer each day. This was precisely why the GSF sailed. Yet instead of receiving aid, Gazans watched as their lifeline was hijacked by Israeli gunboats. What does the world say to that? Israel insists its actions are for security reasons, claiming the flotilla might smuggle weapons. Yet no proof has surfaced. If that were true, why confiscate food and fuel along with it? Analysts warned that Israel's aggression against the GSF could backfire diplomatically. Neutral nations are beginning to speak out. Some argue this could accelerate Israel's political isolation on the world stage. Is Israel sowing the seeds of its own undoing? At the same time, solidarity with Palestinians reached new heights. Protests crossed religious and cultural boundaries, Muslims, Christians, Jews, and atheists marching side by side. Will the world finally recognize Palestine as a humanitarian issue, not just a religious or political conflict? Yet critics scoff at the GSF, calling it symbolic but ineffective. Ships alone cannot dismantle a decades-old blockade. But is symbolism itself not a weapon? Can global solidarity eventually outweigh Israel's war machine? Tensions rose as reports surfaced of injured Israeli demonstrators beaten by their own soldiers. Is Israel now turning its weapons against its own citizens to preserve the siege? The bravery of these Israelis, standing against their own army, may mark a historical shift. Could the future of Palestinian freedom lie not only in external pressure but in the courage of Israelis who refuse to comply with oppression? The world now looks to the United Nations, though skepticism runs deep. Will the Security Council act decisively, or issue yet another toothless statement that vanishes into history? Regardless, the GSF incident has already shaken global opinion. The lingering question: is this the beginning of real change, or just another tragic chapter in Gaza's endless suffering?